Good morning, my lovelies. Today we're going to be talking about video games that are being deemed critically endangered and, quite frankly, could end up becoming and going into the shadow realm, also known as lost media. Meaning you can't play these anymore, you can't find them anymore, unless you want to pay some really obscene prices on eBay. I mean, there's quite a few games that I've been looking for a very long time for a PS2, so I could replay these games how they were when I was a kid. I don't want to pay $1,000. So we're going to be talking about this, and this is a subject that I'm really interested in. So let's go ahead and grab your snacks, grab your drinks, and roll the intro. Welcome back. Now, I found this article on a website called TheVerge.com, and this is what grabbed my attention. Almost 90% of classic games are now critically endangered, say archivists. It is impossibly hard to play games released before 2010. With advancing console generations and the slow demise of both backward compatibility and digital game storefronts, the ability to play older games has been tough. Through a new study on the Video Game History Foundation, or the VGHF, blah 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 blah, and the Software Preservation Network, we now have a better understanding of just how difficult it is accessing older games. 87% of classic games released in the United States are critically endangered, wrote Kelsey Lewin, the co-director of the Video Game History Foundation. You can read the full report here, and the Video Game History Foundation also wrote an accompanying summary blogs with highlights from this report. The report defines classic games, and if you're of a certain age, you may want to sit down for this. A game that was released before 2010. We identified the 2010s as the beginning of an era where digital distribution for retail wide-scale video games had become viable and widely adopted in the home video game consoles, the report said. Confirming the release status of every video game published before 2010 would have been an impossible undertaking. So the report focused on a sampling of over 4,000 games released in the United States on one of the three consoles that have been important to represent different levels of community and commercial interest. Here's how the VGHF defined these categories. Abandoned ecosystems, with low commercial interest and few games available. For our example, we picked Commodore 64. Neglected ecosystems, where there's a lot of commercial interest but not as many games in print. We picked the Game Boy family, from the original Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance. And active ecosystems, where games from these platforms are being re-released all the time. We picked the PlayStation 2. The study found that across all three categories, the numbers of games available never reached above 20%. That's insane. Meaning that around 80% of games published before 2010 are not easily accessible to the masses. The VGHF called out the Game Boy specifically, with only 25 games out of all the... It's early in the morning. It is literally 6:35 a.m. I'm doing this very early. Please forgive my awful speech this morning. Anyway... With only 25 games out of the 1,873 total games released during its lifetime is still available for purchase. That number used to be significantly higher, with 155 games higher, before Nintendo shut down the 3DS and the Wii U virtual storefronts back in March of this year. When the eShops were shut down, the majority of all Game Boy games on the market fell out of release, meaning you can't get these games anymore. Like, you just can't, unless you own that specific game system, or you go on places like eBay, or, your places like, I don't know, even Facebook Marketplace. So, yeah, like, that's kind of terrifying, is all of these games are slowly falling into such neglect and just disappearing. in general. I'm pretty sure that everyone out there has a similar experience to me. Trying so hard to think of a game that you played so long ago, and you just keep asking people and they don't know what it is, and other people don't know what it is. So you find yourself debating whether this game actually existed or not. The one that did that for me was, believe it or not, something I got out of a cereal box for the PC when I was just maybe 5 years old, and it was Captain Crunch's Crunchling Adventure. If anybody else remembers this, let me know. Because I thought this shit was a fever dream. And I had to literally ask people for the last 10 or so years before someone finally went, I think that was a Captain Crunch game. Didn't it come in a cereal box? I'm like, I think it did, because there was a period where games came in cereal boxes, like when disc games were a huge thing still, to get your games on disc. It was so cool to find a game in a cereal box, and it had a little thing, like a circular thing with a clear plastic, so you could see the game inside, and it had the AOL logo on it. Just a long time ago. Probably dating myself very fast right now. Probably dating myself. But yeah, I'm sure everybody has an experience out there like that. What is the game that haunts you? Let me know in the comments below. If I can help, I mean, hey, if there's anybody else in the comments and they read those comments, maybe we can help each other figure out what our fever dream games were from our childhoods. Yeah, let's start that in the comments below. What is the game that you that you remember, but nobody will tell you what it is? Describe it to me. Describe it to everybody in the comments. Be detailed, or as detailed as you possibly can be, and maybe we can help each other out and finally end these personal mysteries of ours. All right, let's go back to the article. Now back to where we left off on the article. I'm sorry I go off on these tangents so often. I know I do it. I'm really sorry if that ever bothers you guys. Again, this is the random show. I'm just gonna, I don't ever have a script. I literally don't have a script at all right now. I mean, when I do things like reviews or something where I want to say a specific thing and I want to think about what I want to say, then yeah, I do necessarily have a script or a list of notes or things to get to. But when I make these kind of videos, talking about news stuff, unless it's a very detailed, very important story, I won't even make bullet notes. So we're just going off and saying whatever comes into my little old brain here. So back to the article. When the eShops were shut down, the majority of all Game Boy games on the market fell out of release, wrote director Phil Salvador. This report was an attempt to provide a scholastic explanation for something gamers already intrinsically know. It's hard to play older games, and it's only getting harder. If something more substantial had not been done to preserve the more widely accessible, what little we have left, we will lose video game history as itself. Video game history is more than just the best sellers, Salvador wrote. If we want to understand and appreciate the history of video games, we need to have a curated list of all the games that publishers decide to have commercial value. Libraries and other archival institutions should be able to step up for these classic games that don't generate some kind of interest an old Mario or Sonic game might. Don't generate the same kind of interest that an old Mario or a Sonic game might. But they have been increasingly hampered by strict copyright restrictions, notably the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DCMA. The cultural heritage sector has petitioned the U.S. Copyright Office for higher exemptions to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to allow libraries and archives to expand preservation and access related activities for these video games, the report said. However, Entertainment Software Association, or ESA, the lobbying arm of the video game industry, has opposed DMCA expansions. According to the arguments from the ESA, loosening the DCMA restrictions with regard to video games would actually hurt publishers' bottom line so that they could ever decide to reissue a classic game. Which, we're going to talk about American McGee's Alice for a little bit, because different video. It's going to be a different video, different tangent, but kind of relates to this. Stay tuned. Yeah. Anyway, and there is certainly some merit to the argument. This week, Limited Run Games announced that it would release over 20 classic titles, including beloved favorites like Jurassic Park for the NES, Tomba, and Gex. Limited Run is also releasing a previously canceled Game Boy Advance game called Shantae Advance Risky Revolution, which will be available to play on a Game Boy cartridge. For its part, the ESA has pushed back against the idea that it's hindering preservation efforts. It simply is not accurate to the industry, has opposed efforts by libraries to have legal access to games for preservation purposes. Stanley Pierre-Louis, president and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association, said in a statement to The Verge, "We believe that preservation can and should be accomplished without jeopardizing video game companies' rights under copyright law." Interestingly enough, the Video Game History Foundation did not share what it thinks should be done. That goal isn't in part of the report. What we're asking with this report is for the video game industry to acknowledge that most classic games are out of print, Salvador wrote, and that the commercial market can't alone be used to solve this. I believe that's the rest of the article, but there's a lot of games out there that, again, with the whole analogy of games that you remember that nobody else remembers, what if that game actually did exist and it just fell into obscurity and nobody else would be able to find it again? And if it's a game that even when you grow up, you still think about it and are actively searching for it, don't you think it's had kind of an impact on you if it literally comes into your mind over and over and over again over the course of your life, and you want to find it and hunt it down? And wouldn't you want other people to have the same impact that you experienced with that game, and have some other people experience that same experience and share the joy and keep it going? It's really sad. Like, there's games that literally are just, you can't get them anymore. They just don't exist. And with things like, there's also news of like Ubisoft and other big companies wanting to restrict the ownership that you have of specific games or games in their catalogs digitally, and getting digital games. There's a whole argument right now going on that I've seen about people claiming that like you don't actually own those games because they're digital, and people are trying to get back into the habit of collecting physical media for that reason. Because, I mean, think about it. As well as you wanting to keep those games for yourself, when those shops closed down, like the Nintendo eShop, they said that they lost a lot of games. Those games just don't exist anymore. They were released digitally, made digitally, kept on digital devices, and when they deleted the shop, the games probably wouldn't work anymore. Or you're one of those only people that have that copy of it. It's just gone. Nobody else could get it. Just gone. There's probably a lot of games in these shops that if they ever went down would just not exist anymore. And I find that kind of terrifying, especially as someone that likes to create things and is interested in art of all different shapes and sizes, whether it be content creation or drawing or doing fun things like bracelets and whatever. It's like, imagine if everything you made just disappeared one day. And I didn't have any backups of it. It would just be a fond memory. And it would make me probably really sad to see it just disappear, to just be gone. And I really believe that people should be more aware of this and wanting to save these games and try to be as basically modern archaeologists and modern historians of the day, trying to preserve history. Because again, the internet hasn't existed for long, but now we're getting into a period where things aren't shiny and new anymore with the internet. We're getting into a period of the internet where things are falling into obscurity. There's a lot of defunct websites out there. I mean, I remember quite a few websites that I liked growing up. Club Penguin, for one. Anyone else liked Club Penguin? Club Penguin was great. Disney Fairies Online. Disney Fairies Online was my shit. I was on there every single day. I would get to school, we'd have computer lab, and as soon as I was done with my assignments, I used to try to get all my computer assignments done in computer lab so fast so I could get on Disney Fairies Online or DisneyChannel.com and play the Flash game, specifically like the Stitches 625's Sandwich Stacker and the Zack and Cody hotel game where they have to like avoid Mr. Mosby. Like, it was great. And now those games, you can't, I mean, I'm pretty sure you could find them somewhere, but I can't just type in, www.disneychannel.com and play those games again. Disney Fairies Online doesn't exist, and there has been a preservation effort, and people are literally rebuilding it from the ground up, and I find that is so awesome, because previously you couldn't find this anymore. There's a lot of things that I remember that just don't exist anymore. There used to be a music website called Lala that I used to have, and I had a whole bunch of like playlists on it and everything. It doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't. Like, it went out of business. And it's crazy. So games are doing the same thing now. And it's wild, and I feel like we need to start acknowledging that we need to preserve this kind of stuff. Does it make you feel horribly old? Yes, I haven't even left my 20s yet. For goodness sakes. I feel absolutely ancient saying this, but I also, as someone that loves history and seeing these bits of our current history as far back as only like 20 or so years going missing, it makes the person that loves history and me being like, we need to take up the mantle and start preserving this stuff and collecting it and trying to keep it as available as long as possible so other people can then keep it going and keep that history alive, so to speak, and preserving it as like, I don't know, artifacts of history, of our current history, and trying to preserve that kind of thing. In a way, I don't know if any of this is ever going to make sense, but it's just something that I have had on my mind, and is just really crazy that this article came across my news scroll this morning, so to speak, and I was like, well, I guess it's a sign. Let's go ahead and talk about it, because it's something I'm actually really passionate about. I've been trying to hunt down some older PS2 games that I personally remember playing, and yeah, they might have been the more popular titles, like Need for Speed. If anyone also was absolutely obsessed with Need for Speed, and might still be. Does anyone remember that, speaking of racing games, does anyone remember that one Xbox 360 title that Disney made called, wasn't it like Stunt something? Split Second. It was called Split Second, and it was a racing game that Disney Interactive made. I thought that game was great. If anyone else remembers Split Second, I might put like the thing on there. But if anyone remembers that, did you like that game, or was I just really into racing games? There was a period where I was just really into racing games. Don't know why, but I was. So, yeah. Let me know all your thoughts about this in the comments below. I'm really excited now that I'm done talking about a certain subject. If you know, you know. I have such a reinvigorated sense for creating content, and I'm genuinely smiling today, and I'm so happy to talk about this. So, yeah, thank you all for just being so supportive and everything. It literally feels like a gigantic weight is off my chest. You have no idea. It feels like there's just a huge ass weight off my chest, and I'm just so happy about it. So, yeah. I love you all so much, and I hope you have the best day. Bye!